All right, thanks for stopping by. We're going to refactor this view or kind of clean up this view using CSS flex boxes. I'm a big fan of the Flexbox, super lightweight way to accomplish grid system and really clean looking forms with just a little bit of practice. So going to be referring to the console a lot just to kind of get an idea of what Flex containers do. So if I take a look at this section with a class of boxes, the typical way I like to figure out what a flex element or property will do is by just doing the live updates here instead of going back and forth with my code. So I've selected this section, and right now it has a bunch of articles with the class of box card. And here we just have some typical content. So dealing with kind of an index view of boxes. And I want to make this box container a display of flex. Okay, so right away, this has some default settings. So what we just saw happen was every flex box has a flex direction. So it's oriented as a column or a row. And what it did was it went automatically to row. So this is what it defaults to. You see Fox, Mitch, and Zob box backwards. Xop. They are in order from like first to last. Row reverse will actually switch that order, and it will also align it to the opposite end of the container. So the other thing we can do is orient it in a column reverse, right? So here where you can see the order changes. And then with row reverse, there's like one other way to oriented, so it's still at the beginning, but just oriented at, or just flipped in the order and not actually moved to the end of the container, but we won't worry about that for now. In this case, I really do like the row, so the flex direction property is not needed. Let's try out justify content. So this defines how the remaining space in the container gets distributed to the whole container. So right now we can see, if I click this, there's all this space. How can I maintain? Yeah, all this space here after the boxes, right? So I want to say, hey, let's distribute that evenly amongst the items. So I'm going to say justify content. And just to cycle through, we'll take a look at how this space can get distributed. So if we want to put the remaining space on the left and right of all of the container or all the items, then here we can see all the space now is on the left and right, which centers the items. Flex end would put all of the content on the end of the container, put the remaining space at the beginning. Flex start is the default. Space around puts a little bit of the space around each item, and space between is just different in the sense that they don't put it around the first and last items in the container. So here, let's see. I kind of like flex start actually. I think that looks fine. Just imagine if we get more and more that like a really spread out view might look a little different. Let's just go with flex start. And again, that is the default. So if I took these off, nothing would happen. So justify content flex start is the default. That looks good for now for the boxes. And now I want to style up this this form, right? So we have an index view, but we also, faithful to CRUD app, we have some forms that we can use to add a box. And it looks super ugly right now. So I won't ever make this look super good color-wise and design-wise, but I can position the content in a more intuitive way. So real quick, since we added display flex to our boxes class, let's go ahead and add that permanently. So if I go just in a little Sinatra app here, go to my views, public boxes, there we go. So to my boxes, we added display flex. So now if I refresh the page, we'll have those updates. Cool. So now let's make this form a little more friendly. So here I have a new box form, and I have a header, and I have a form. What I want to do is make this whole section a flex container. So I'll display flex, still in a row, that's fine. So this made every item, let's take it off real quick. You can see that here the form elements are below the header. When I make the whole container a flex container, it's going to line everything up in a row. And forms tend to be in a column orientation. So here I'm going to define the column flex direction. And this is interesting because it points out that only immediate children get affected by flex containers. So we have the new box container, and we have H2 and a form. So only these two are the items. So I'm also going to make the form a flex container. So again, display flex, I'll make it flex direction column. This defines all of the forms to be in a column format. And right now it's still super ugly because it's the entire width of the container. So let's drop the width of the whole container. And let's take a look at the width of our cards. We have a width of 250 pixels. Let's just go ahead and add a width of 250 pixels. Much nicer. And now it's still a little cluttered, so I want to add some space between each of these fields, maybe make the submit button a little more narrow. But first, let's go ahead and update our changes in the permanent code, because if I refresh, it all goes away. Oh no. So what we did was to new box, we made it display flex. And I think I just have CSS. Yeah, not Sass. Okay. So there, that was the new box. And I also had a form within new box. So I displayed flex. I did flex direction column. And did a width pixels. I also had a new box form. Also made flex direction column. Save. Yep. So if we refresh, we'll get those changes that we saw earlier. And now we want a little more space between each item. There's a couple things I could do. I could define a default height for the container. And since our cards, just to go with like a somewhat similar theme, let's add a default height to the container, which makes it a little longer. And now we have leftover space, right? So now this flex container can actually work with some leftover space. If there's no leftover space, flex boxes don't really do anything. So I want to see, this is the remaining space for that. So I want to say the form still has no leftover space. But just to get some more reps with our Flexbox, now we can say justify content, and we can see the remaining space distributed differently. Space around, space between. I still like it as flex start. What we want to do is add a height to the form. I think we can do a percentage here. Justify content. Oops. Second through this. Yeah. Space around, space between. Okay, cool. These are all kind of weird options. So I made it so that the form would take up 100% of its like available space. And then I'm using justify content to distribute it. And all of that looks like kind of gross. So let's maybe we'll add justify content. Let's say like we're probably going to want it to have like space around. What I don't want is the entire height. So we can see if I move this portion of the form, something more like that in terms of how they're distributed. And okay, so